What is up, you guys? It's Adam Gillespie with Rancid coming at you with yet another video, and today I'll be discussing an article from the Student Life, which just take a look at the title and you'll understand why it is that I'm going to be talking about this, especially as a Lord of the Rings fan myself. It says, Opinion, backlash against race swapping in the Rings of Power misses the point. No, it doesn't. First of all, it does not because it is not inaccurate to be upset about the race swapping of iconic characters in the Tolkien Lord of the Rings lore. In case you couldn't tell, I was doing my pompous British accent. But no. Before I get started, I do want to shout out Disparu. I believe I'm subscribed to this guy's channel. He was actually the guy who I saw covering this article first. So, I would not know to cover this article if it was not because I saw Disparu. That being said, I am going to like this video because he deserves it, and if you guys would be willing to check him out as well, he could use all the support he can get. Well, obviously he could use all the support because anyone can use all the support they can get, right? Any channel trying to do the right thing for the fandom, any channel trying to be a good, moral, upstanding channel that just wants to protect the lore and protect the actual franchise that they're a fan of, they deserve support. So go support Disparu by subscribing. He's a great dude when he covers videos, when he covers opinion pieces like this, when he covers articles on Lord of the Rings and other media franchises, so on and so forth. Great dude to listen to. I highly recommend it. Now, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and X out of here. I'm going to get back to the main point of this video. In this article, we're going to see that this person obviously writes it as an opinion, but they're going to write it as if it's fact, okay? So we're going to go ahead and get started in this. The contemporary fantasy genre owes its existence to J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Indeed it does. No one's going to argue with that. Lord of the Rings is basically the main reason why it is that fantasy is so well perceived and so well received in the modern era today. In it, Tolkien consolidated and popularized the various fantastical archetypes, like elves, dwarves, and the Dark Lord, that have since ingrained themselves into humanity's collective cultural psyche. Again, indeed, that is accurate. Dwarves, elves, and the Dark Lord, they became very popular through the publishing of the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings book series. They are very popular because of the fact they're basically just a story about good versus evil. That's all it ever needed to be. That's all it ever had to be. That's all it ever strove to be. And that's one of the reasons why it's so good, is because it doesn't focus on a political message. It doesn't focus on race-baiting characters. It doesn't focus on sexuality or sexual diversity. It's literally just a group of people doing the best that they can to stop evil from overcoming the land. That is all that Lord of the Rings is about, and that's all it needs to be about. That being said, let's go ahead and get into the rest of the article. I know you guys are going to have some questions. I have some questions myself. But let's go ahead and get into this. The cinematic adaptation of Lord of the Rings matches the legendary renown of the original trilogy, with The Return of the King, the final installment, making an unprecedented $1.1 billion at the box office. I'm betting that the majority of the reason why it is that it made that money is because of the fact that it's mostly stuck to the lore, and mostly tried to encapsulate everything that the books stood for. It mostly just tried to tell the story of the books, and indeed it did. It did also take some liberties here and there, but at the end of the day, it was just good because it focused on trying to capture the spirit of Lord of the Rings. I know I'm switching back and forth between accents, but sometimes insanity will do that to you. Alright, crappy joke. The Hobbit series, despite its unfavorable critic reception, remained on par with its predecessor in terms of popularity and financial success. Now, financial success and popularity can be very different. Financial success for something can mean that a lot of people went to go see it. I mean, take a look at Star Wars. A lot of people went to go see the sequel trilogy. Doesn't mean it's popular, doesn't mean it's good. The sequel trilogy is very poorly written, has terrible characters. The story is bland, boring, and it's just basically a retreading of the original story. And The Hobbit, I mean, it was a movie that could have probably been made in terms of maybe 1 or 2 films, and it was stretched out over 3. Not only that, but they took some massive liberties, and it just felt a little bit ham-fisted at times. It was extremely, an extremely large financial success, but that was because of the fact that it was riding off the back of Lord of the Rings. Same thing that it might happen with Amazon's Rings of Power. However, because of the fandom, because of the fellowship of the Lord of the Rings fandom, there's a higher possibility that Amazon's rings of power will fail. And the reason for that is because people are starting to see through the smog and see through the fog of identity politics that have been injected into their favorite piece of art. That being said, let's go ahead and get into the rest of this article. This fall, another mega project will join the Tolkien cinematic universe, the Rings of Power. It's not going to be that great if you just take a look at what's going on, the leaks, the actual trailer, the super fan events. Amazon has no respect for the lore. Amazon has no respect for Tolkien or his writing. And you can tell just by everything that Amazon's been doing, they tried to pander to the fan base by bringing in a bunch of really terrible actors to pretend like they were super fans, and then they basically just ranted about how I love the books, but they didn't have the necessary skin color diversity that I want to see in my fantasy. How about you go read another fantasy where there's actually that diversity, instead of trying to ham-fistedly insert gender identity, diversity, sexual identity, all this other stupid garbage that's political and politicized today into something that doesn't need it. Amazon's latest television adaptation of Tolkien's mythopoetic legendarium is set to chronicle the events of In Arda, the franchise's universe, thousands of years before the original trilogy, with a 5-season budget estimated to exceed $1 billion. This show might become the most expensive television production in history. Now, I'm not going to say that they're wrong on that. In all actuality, this has been... I think they've already spent about $850 million on this project, and they haven't even gotten the first season out yet. I think they spent like $650 million just to get like the rights to make a series on this, and they've spent another like $150 million to $250 million, or maybe $200 million on like marketing and trailers and paying actors to pretend like they're super fans. It's really, really ridiculous if you ask me. While the upcoming Amazon series has sparked considerable excitement from the fans and critics alike, its most recent announcement entitled a massive controversy within and beyond the Lord of the Rings fandom. Over the show's multi-ethnic cast, The Rings of Power marks the first time non-white actors will portray prominent characters in Tolkien's cinematic adaptations. Arondir and Disa, played respectively by Ismael Cruz Cordova and Sofia Namveri. This is the first non-white elf and dwarf on screen. And the reason why people are so frustrated about this, before I get into anything else about this article, is because if you take a look at the descriptions and the character descriptions and the actual words of Tolkien himself, these characters should not have darker complexion. At the most, they should be just about as dark as your average Sicilian. But even then, that's probably too dark, because if you actually take a look at what Tolkien said in the actual regions that he believed that they would live in, it's not a region that black people would be living in during the time of the story. It's not that region. And if you look at the actual population of those areas, back when he was actually writing these stories, it's going to be people of whiter complexion. That's not racist. That's just historic. That's historic, not racist. Before anyone gets their panties in a twist about that, it's literally just taking Tolkien at his word. Who better to take at their word than the guy who wrote the book to begin with? Okay? Now, that being said, he's also took a huge amount of effort to make these races of individuals, like the elves, like the dwarves, like the hobbits, into believable character types. He did a lot to make sure that they made sense looking the way they looked. For instance, elves were born before the sun. They mostly like the lights of stars. That being said, that means that they don't have the same tanning. They're not going to be of a darker complexion. You take a look at people, there's this thing called microevolution. Microevolution is basically the person's ability to adapt to certain situations. An elf born into a dark place is going to have fairer skin because there's less need for melanin and less need for massive amounts of melanin to protect their skin from harmful solar rays. There's less need for that. The same thing with the dwarves. They were born and raised in underground cave systems where they mined for the majority of their time. They're going to be of whiter complexion because of how biology works, because of how simple microevolution works. And microevolution being pretty much the only actual accurate evolution that there is. But again, it's ridiculous that there's this huge desire to push this racial diversity into something that doesn't need it. Not only does it not need it, but when people actually call attention to it and say, hey, this isn't part of the story, people go, oh, you're just a racist. And it's like, no, 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 we're just trying to stay true to the lore. We're just trying to stay true to the lore. The reasons why it is that these characters aren't going to have black skin or are going to have darker complexions than maybe even your average Sicilian. You know, we're trying to point out the reasons why that wouldn't happen. You're disrespecting the lore of Tolkien's writings. That's what the fan base is saying. And here we go, we're going to get on with the rest of the article. This casting decision, however, has antagonized many Lord of the Rings fans who argue that this act of race swapping undermines the authenticity of the adaptation. And it does. If you take something and race swap characters that are not supposed to be that skin color, you are undermining the original writings. You are undermining the actual original lore. The reason why it's such a big deal is because if we were to race swap a black character to being white, it would be everyone's up in arms. So when you race swap a white character to being black, it should be just as upsetting. You shouldn't be allowed to just race swap characters and get away with it willy-nilly. I mean, respect the lore. That's basically all people are asking. Just respect the lore. Beyond simple internet rage, the backlash has become a consolidated phenomenon prevailing on almost all major platforms. YouTube comments under the teaser trailer lament the supposed destruction of the Tolkien classic at the hand of the woke social justice warrior garbage of a film. And that is accurate. It's only going to... the only reason why it is that you have race swapping of popular characters and popular races of individuals like elves, dwarves, hobbits, the other characters in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, other mythical creatures, is because of the fact that there's social justice warriors trying to inject a certain racial quota into their products so they can make it to the Grammys or they can make it to the Oscars or something stupid like that, because that's all Hollywood cares about. It's getting some stupid trophy that says, we were diverse enough for half a year. It's ridiculous. Thousands vented their frustration by reposting an ironically misattributed Tolkien quote, "Evil cannot create anything new, it can only spoil and destroy what good forces have invented and created." That's not a misappropriation of the quote. That is literally what's going on. These people don't care about the lore, they're taking something that they know is popular, and they're turning it into something that is going to fail. They're injecting social justice into a project, because they don't have a project or product of their own that is popular enough to have those things in there. The only reason why they're using Lord of the Rings is because it is popular and there's a massive fan base. And they think we can get our message out as quickly as possible to as many people as possible by taking up the biggest properties like DC Comics, Marvel Comics, pretty much the entire corporation of Disney. And look at what's going on with Amazon now. They're injecting social justice warriorism into a good old-fashioned fantasy adventure story like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And it's frustrating. That is not a misappropriated quote. That is a quote that is exactly correctly used by everyone who does use it. And I'm going to use it right now. Evil cannot create anything new. It can only spoil and destroy what good forces have invented and created. That is entirely accurate, and that is exactly what's going on. They don't care about the lore. They're not trying to expand the lore. They're trying to manipulate it into something that they want. They're trying to manipulate it to be some level of social justice warriorism so that they can get some notoriety with their bigwigs up top. Okay, that's all that this is. For them, the inclusion of a multi-ethnic cast seems quite analogous to the atrocious deeds of Sauron. Unsurprisingly, the most viewed trailer reaction videos from independent YouTube channels almost unanimously decry the casting decision, their bitterness matched only by the overwhelming unison of disapproval in their comment section. The reason why people are so unified in hating the race swapping is because it's unnecessary and it's just a way to crap on Tolkien's writings. This collective frustration towards the Rings of Power reflects a misinterpretation of Tolkien that, if left unchecked, gatekeeps the fantasy classic within a stringently racialized framework. Again, take Tolkien's words for what he says them as. They're very simple to understand. Take the regions that he talks about. Look at everything that Tolkien says and tell me that he's like, oh yeah, no, the elves are definitely black, Asian, Hispanic, they're totally... No, he designed them specifically to be fair-skinned, tall, and lightweight. That is the description. That is the description of an elf. a fair-skinned individual who is lighter than the average man and is very tall. That's the whole description of the elves. Dwarves have lighter skin because of the fact that they're in caverns their entire time. And a majority of the reason why people are getting so upset about the freaking dwarf queen or the dwarf princess played by Disa is because they're taking away the dwarven princess's beard. Female dwarves are supposed to be so indistinguishable from male dwarves that the outside world thinks that there are no such thing as female dwarves. It's not that hard. Just put a fake beard on a woman and you're good. This implication becomes clear when we examine what such arguments contain, those lamenting and supposed. The race-swapping decision followed a similar thread. They often begin the polemic by pointing out that Lord of the Rings and other source materials composed by Tolkien contain occasional references to the pale skin tone of Elven and Númenórean ancient human characters. No, duh. That's the whole reason why people are so frustrated. It's because Tolkien himself described them as looking that way. Furthermore, they claim that Tolkien intended his legendarium to become an Anglo-Saxon national mythology. The veracity of this claim is dubious, and hence its protagonists must be white. Casting non-white actors as protagonists, the argument goes, risks turning the series into an inauthentic bastardization that breaks the world-building tenets of the source material. In essence, those decrying the upcoming shows see the homogeneous skin pigmentation of its characters as a must-have for all Tolkien adaptations, and when challenged, back up their arguments with different versions of because Tolkien said so. Again, if Tolkien himself, the writer and creator of this entire franchise that you are piggybacking off of to inject your social justice warrior ideologies onto, is saying in his own words that characters are going to be white-skinned or fair-skinned and have fairer skin, it's probably better to acknowledge the fact that that is what Tolkien intended. Instead of saying, "Oh, he definitely means that we wanted a 6'2" basketball player on the elf team," I think that we should probably just take Tolkien at his word. I don't see what is so big a deal about that. I don't see why it is that it's so difficult to just take the writer at his word and do what it is that he says he wanted in his stories. I mean, Peter Jackson did that. Peter Jackson, for the majority of the story, although there were some liberties taken, he desired first and foremost to capture the essence of the films, and he didn't inject any politics into it. And that's exactly what's going on today. They're injecting nothing but politics into this, and it's so frustrating. Again, because it's needless. It's needless. It really is needless. And here he's going to ask, but did Tolkien really intend this? The answer is a resounding no. From a technical standpoint, sporadic references to certain fair-skinned characters cannot preclude the possibility that non-white characters exist. This applies especially to Anadir and Disa, who the show created and do not appear in Tolkien's original work. So you are creating non-canon characters so that you can then say, oh, well, this is examples of why it is that we should have characters of diverse skin color. Probably not even diverse ways of thinking, but just diverse skin color in here. Because that's all these people care about is skin color, skin color, skin color. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It matters what you think, okay? That's the most important thing. It matters what you think and what your moral values are. Technicalities aside, characters' skin color does not play an integral role in Tolkien's narratives in the first place. Yes, it does. It does because that's part of the lore. Lord of the Rings and the broader legendarium tell stories of friendship, conviction, and courage in the face of despair. So here's my question. If it's not a big deal to you, if it's not a big deal that people could be race swapped, then why are you making it such a big deal that it is? Why are you making such a big deal that people want the original story to be the way that it is? If it's really not a big deal about the skin color of a person, then just make the skin color of the people what Tolkien said the skin color of the people was. How about you do that? That's the immediate question that I have. I'm sorry for making this video go long, guys. I'm very passionate about Lord of the Rings, and to see it being disrespected like this is frustrating. Facing incredible odds, the distrusting kingdoms of humans, elves, and dwarves must overcome their past grudges. Basically, they just give a definition of what the Lord of the Rings story is. But, I mean, look, I'm not going to cover much more of this. You guys can pause the video and read the rest of this if you want. But it's frustrating. Again, this is quoted as an opinion piece, but the fact that they're talking so fervently about this and trying to make it seem so factual by basically saying, Well, Tolkien didn't necessarily constantly talk about how white people were the characters in his stories, so therefore there must be some other type of character out there. Yeah, you could make characters about what is it? There are certain characters, there are certain regions which have dark complexion for the skin color of their characters. You could make a story about that. You could make a story about that, but no, 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 no. We're going to inject politics and inject social justice warriorism and inject racial diversity into a region of the story that doesn't need it or that shouldn't have it in general. Because again, elves come from a time before the sun was created in Tolkien's works. The sun was created after the elves, according to Tolkien. Okay, that being said, that means that the elves would probably be of lighter complexion because they didn't have the same melanin as an average person. Numenorians are fair-skinned, elves are fair-skinned, dwarves probably have some leathery skin, but they are also born in climates and regions that do not have sunlight to affect the color of their skin. They're going to be lighter. They're going to have fairer skin. That is part of the reason why it's part of Tolkien's lore. And if you are that pent up about not disrespecting something so simple as the skin color of characters in Tolkien's lore, then you shouldn't be making an adaptation about Tolkien's stories. You shouldn't be doing that. It's annoying, it's pointless, it's ridiculous, and it's unnecessary. Alright, well that's been my rant for today, guys. I know it's kind of, I know the buzzing in the background from my computer is getting annoying, but I just ordered a microphone, so soon enough you'll have some clear audio, and when it does, I'll play around with different accents, different voices, and I'll get you guys videos a lot easier because it's not going to sound so crappy. But that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down below. It helps me to learn it from what you guys are thinking. Make sure to share this video with your friends. You know, get this out there. You know, raise awareness about this whole ridiculous desire to race swap characters and inject social justice into stories that don't need it. You know, it's kind of pointless. It really is. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. That's really all I got to say for today. Oh, don't forget to follow me on Rumble. I've been uploading all the same videos on YouTube as I have been on Rumble, and the reason why I'm doing it on Rumble is because if I ever get kicked off of YouTube, I'd like to have a place that I can fall back on that's not going to kick me off for sharing my opinions. Alright, that being said, I hope you guys have a great day and a great rest of the week. But before I go, I want to say one more thing. You guys have been awesome. I love seeing the support that you've been showing the channel. I've reached, I think, 44 subscribers, and it's so cool to see the channel growing. I love the fact that our fellowship is growing. And once again, I really do hope that you guys have a great day, and I really do hope that you guys have a great rest of the week.